Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I wanted to share a few brief housekeeping announcements. First, we would like to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance of today's town hall. We hope to address many of your COVID-19 vaccine questions over the next hour with our panelists. And if you have additional questions or need clarification, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. And as a reminder, this is a public forum, so anything you type will be visible to others. Today's town hall is being recorded and streamed live on the Montgomery County social media pages, and the recording will be available on the Montgomery County YouTube page, and we will also send that link out to everyone who registered tonight. And now with that, I will turn it over to tonight's moderator, Dr. Valar Kush, to start our town hall.
Thanks, Kelly, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Valar Kush, Chair of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners, and I'm so pleased to have four wonderful experts on both pediatrics and vaccinations here with us tonight. I am going to quickly introduce them. Their bios are way longer than what I'm going to share with you tonight, but we want to save the bulk of our time for a really important conversation tonight about vaccination in adolescents and young adults. So first, in alphabetical order, is Dr. Federico Andino. Dr. Andino is a board-certified family physician serving the community of Norristown, Pennsylvania. He attended the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador School of Medicine and completed his residency at Montgomery Hospital in Norristown. Dr. Andino has been in practice for over 15 years and is affiliated with Einstein Medical Center in East Norriton. Dr. Francis Jayraj is a board-certified pediatrician at Lansdale Pediatric and Adolescent Medical Associates and is affiliated with Jefferson Health, Abington Hospital, and Lansdale Hospital. He's a graduate of Seth GS Medical College in Mumbai and has been in practice for over 20 years. Dr. Jayraj has won several awards for his community service and sits on several boards that promote philanthropy and cultural diversity. Dr. Paul Offit is the director of the Vaccine Education Center and professor of pediatrics in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He is also the Maurice R. Hillman Professor of Vaccinology at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Offit is an internationally recognized expert in the fields of virology and immunology and was a member of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. He is currently a member of the Food and Drug Administration Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee and has won many awards for his research and work. And Dr. Steven Shapiro is a board-certified pediatrician at Pediatric Medical Associates in East Norriton, Pennsylvania. He is affiliated with Jefferson Health, Abington Hospital, where he also serves as the chair of the Department of Pediatrics, in addition to being a member of the Pennsylvania Medical Society's Board of Trustees. Dr. Shapiro has also been very active in advocating for legislation that provides the best medical care for children and adolescents. He received his medical degree from Kansas City University of Osteopathic Medicine and has been in practice for more than 20 years. All right, so with that, we are going to jump right into this, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Offit. This is the question on the top of many parents' minds right now. Why vaccinate children when they have been thought to be least likely to spread the virus or to have serious side effects from the virus?
Well, so it's estimated now that between 15 to 20% of all infections in this country are in children, number one. Number two is it's also estimated that somewhere between 300 and 500 children have died from this infection. About 16,000 children have been hospitalized. One of the reasons that they've gotten hospitalized is the so-called multisystem inflammatory disease, which if you've ever seen it up close is pretty frightening. Usually children are fine. They're picked up just serendipitously as being infected because they were exposed to someone in the family or to a friend. They're asymptomatic, and then the virus goes away. And then a month later, they come back. They have high fever, evidence of lung, liver, heart, or kidney involvement. And I have no doubt that a subset of those children may well suffer longer-term problems, much as we see with another multisystem inflammatory disease like Kawasaki. So if a virus can cause children to suffer, can cause them to be hospitalized, and can cause them to die, and you can prevent that safely, then we should prevent it.
Great. And a lot of parents want to know, how well is this COVID-19 vaccine working in adolescents?
for measles. There was a study done by Pfizer of 2,300 children, 12 to 15-year-olds that were divided in half. Half got the vaccine, half got placebo. The vaccine induced excellent immune responses, was safe, and there were 18 cases of COVID in that trial, all in the placebo group. So, I'm sure the parents who lost the coin flip and whose children were in the placebo group wish that they'd won the coin flip and gotten in the vaccine group. Now, the good news is if you have a child over 12, you don't have to wait for the coin flip. You can just choose to get the vaccine, which can protect your child.
That's great. And it's certainly easy to get the vaccine in Montgomery County right now. Plenty of vaccine is available, which is great news. Dr. Andino, what do you think the main risks of COVID are for children? Dr. Offit talked about some of the most serious complications, but what kinds of risks are you seeing from COVID in children? Oh, Dr. Andino, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So again, thank you very much for the invitation and to participate and be part of helping the community. So I think I have to echo of what Dr. Offit said about the fact that actually children do get sick with COVID. There's been I believe going around saying that children do not get sick with COVID. It is a fact that they do. Fortunately, they typically don't experience, as harsh of a disease or symptoms as the adults or elder do. However, it is important for us to acknowledge again that, as of March 2021, we had 3.4 million positive cases of COVID in children ages younger than 18 years, and about almost 300 deaths related to COVID complications. So when we think about COVID side effects or COVID effects, we can go from the usual respiratory symptoms or respiratory complications, which could be pneumonia or acute otitis media, and also as we've seen in other children getting gastrointestinal illness, such as diarrhea, which should cause dehydration and complications that will bring them to the hospital as well. Because of their mild disease, they can be considered to be sometimes asymptomatic, and that's what could be confounding about knowing if they are positive COVID or not. So among the most serious complications of COVID will be what Dr. Offit as well mentioned, is the multisystem inflammatory syndrome, which has been causing not only death because of the complication, but long-term complications as well. And if we're going to be discussing in the further long-term complications, I think it is important that we are aware that there are also long-term complications out of COVID in children. So about the vaccination risks. So we know that, and it's a fact that the FDA and the CDC take vaccination precautions very seriously. And that should be reassuring to all of us. They are making sure that the vaccine is safe as well as it is effective. And any vaccine that we have at hand, always comes in with a potential risk for an adverse reaction. And COVID is not different than that. So, however, we don't have, or there has not been shown, unfortunately, has not been shown any or much evidence that it poses any additional or different risk that it will cause in adults. So the most common side effects of a vaccination will be the site, soreness, redness, and pain that could cause. And Along with that, usually people have experienced tiredness, headache, mild fever, muscle aches, some chills. But all these are temporary side effects or risks or complications from the vaccine, usually lasting less than 48 hours and showing between the first 2 to 6 weeks after the vaccination. We yet don't know about long-term complications or effects because this is a new vaccine and we still constantly monitoring and trying to find out if there are any. The last thing would be, there is a rare and significant side effect or potential side effect, but as I mentioned, it is pretty rare, and it's an allergic reaction, which could be as serious as an anaphylactic reaction, which is what sometimes can be quite serious. Fortunately, there's been precautions that have been taken when we vaccinate, and every time someone gets vaccinated, in order to prevent this or detect this side effect, that it's usually immediate, we ask patients to stay, about 15 minutes after vaccination so they can be monitored. And if they do have this reaction, something can be taken care of and safely taken care of.
It's definitely a treatable
to the
reaction.
end of this whole thing. Yeah. So
yeah,
as many times has been said, the benefit from the vaccine is way heavier in comparison with the side effects of COVID infection, and that also needs to be well acknowledged by the community. It is always better to prevent the disease than actually treat it after it actually occurs, because with the treatment we're we're exposing to risk, to other risks by treatment per se.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a really great point. Dr. Jayraj, what do you tell parents who are worried about the long-term effects of the COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be on the panel. I must also add that it's a great honor to be on the same panel as Dr. Offit, who we all know is a world-renowned virologist. Well, as far as the long-term things are concerned, I have been in practice for pretty much 50 years in pediatrics, and that's a long time. And a lot of the vaccines that we are using today came during my practice time. Before that, there were very few vaccines. So I've had a chance to see the long-term effects of vaccines, which are basically none. Generally, the side effects, if you see, are within the first or two. And if you do not get long-term effects from that, you're not going to get. Now, let's come to the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this obviously is a new vaccine. We really do not know the long-term effects. And that's exactly, I think, what the audience ought to know. We really do not know. But if we extrapolate from past vaccines, we could say with some confidence that the long-term effects are not likely to be there. And as the previous speakers have said, the advantages or the benefits of the vaccine far, far outweigh about any possible side effects.
Great, thank you. Dr. Shapiro, we've had several people asking about the COVID-19 vaccine and food allergies. Is this vaccine safe for people with food allergies?
Thanks, Val. Thanks for asking that. It's a question that comes up quite frequently in the office setting. They're really, you can answer this question at various times, but now that so many doses have been administered, we have a good body of knowledge, and I can say with a certain amount of assurity that when you're specifically asking about food, there are virtually no reports of food-related allergy causing any contraindication to the vaccine. And, there's always a chance. There was a report of a polysorbate allergy that had some effect initially in the messenger RNA vaccines, and may still be a considered possibility for the Janssen vaccine. But overall, I would say that if you have a food allergy, you really don't need to be concerned about any issues related to that, precluding you from receiving the vaccine.
Okay, great. Well, that's reassuring to hear for sure. Dr. Offit, we've also gotten a number of questions about vaccine risks having something to do with maybe future fertility or for children going through puberty in a normal way. I think there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that suggests that there may be some issues there.
Well, if it's on the internet, it can't be wrong.
Yeah, but we're on the internet right now, so be careful.
So this notion of the vaccine affecting fertility was born of a petition that was sent by two researchers to something called the European Medicines Agency, which is like the sort of FDA equivalent in Europe, claiming that the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, which is the protein to which we make antibodies, during in response to this vaccine, mimicked a protein that was on the surface of placental cells called syncytin-1. So the thinking was, if you're making an antibody response to this protein, you're also inadvertently making an antibody response to syncytin-1. And the reason they said that was that there are sequence homologies between those two proteins, which first of all was wrong. It's like saying you and I have the same social security number because they both contain the number 5. So that was wrong. And also, if you look, there is no so-called molecular mimicry. Where people who have antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, those antibodies don't bind to syncytin-1. So that was always wrong. Secondly, there was a study essentially that looked at this. I mean, the two phase 3 studies for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, women who were included in that study were not pregnant. They were also asked not to become pregnant during that study. But as Jeff Goldblum said in the movie Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So there were 36 pregnancies during those trials. And if it was true that this vaccine affected fertility, then those instances of pregnancy should have been either all or mostly in the placebo group, but they weren't. They were equally divided, 18 and 18. So the vaccine neither enhanced nor lessened fertility. And then finally, remember, natural infection also induces antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. We just had 100 million infections in this country over the last year plus. I mean, that 32 million number is low. Antibody surveillance studies suggest it's probably closer to 100 million. It's about 30% of the population. So if that's true, then what happened to the birth rate? And the birth rate should have gone down. But in fact, it stayed pretty much the same. There were 3.6 million births last year. So it's all wrong. And you're right. It's the most frequent question I get asked. It's all over the internet. And it's so hard to unring the bell. I mean, it's very easy to scare people. It's hard to unscare them. So those are the facts. And hopefully those facts will be convincing.
I can append to Dr. Offit's answer by saying at Abington, where we deliver a lot of babies, the initial fear and trepidation based on the pandemic was real. We didn't see that typical uptick in the number of newborns, but now we look to May through August as being a real increased number of births. And personally, when I was vaccinating in the clinics, I saw many pregnant moms who came in and asked an appropriate question about, is it safe? And we reassured them, and they all were vaccinated. So stay tuned. We had about 400 deliveries last month at Abington, and I suspect as many next month and the months to come.
I bet. And Dr. Offit, how about puberty? No issue there either, right?
Right, no issue there, and also no issue for pregnancy. I mean, when this vaccine was first released, the recommendation by the CDC was pregnant women could choose to get this vaccine, knowing that they had a 2.5 to 3-fold increased risk of being hospitalized or require intensive care unit treatment as compared to women of the same age who weren't pregnant. Now we have thousands, really more than 100,000 pregnant women who've gotten vaccinated. The CDC just published a study looking at pregnant women who chose to get a vaccine compared to the pregnant women who chose not to get a vaccine to see if there was any difference in maternal outcome or fetal outcome now that hundreds of babies have been born. No difference. So again, pregnant women are now recommended to get this vaccine by the CDC.
And
yeah, that's really reassuring.
ACOG has endorsed that as well for even women undergoing fertility treatment. So there's really no reason, there's a bigger reason to risk your health by not getting the vaccine as opposed to worrying about whether it would affect your pregnancy or your attempt to become pregnant.
That's great. Very helpful. So Dr. Offit, one other side effect that's popped up that a lot of people have read about in the media in the last maybe week, 10 days, which is some adolescents experiencing something called myocarditis, which is an inflammation around the heart. And we're very fortunate to have you here since you advise the FDA. What do we know about that potential side effect?
Right, so you're right. This has been noticed both in the United Kingdom and Israel and the United States, that older adolescents and young adults, typically within a week of typically the second dose, although it has been reported for the first dose, have some evidence of heart muscle involvement. Usually it's transient. It's presaged by some chest pain, abdominal pain. It's usually mild and goes away. But the question is that because of the vaccine or not? Now it is, as the cardiologists say, myocarditis season. The virus that probably principally responsible for myocarditis, Coxsackie-B, is typically a spring virus. So, and it's not that rare. There's about 10 to 20 cases per 100,000 people per year. So if that's true, which is the same as 100 to 200 cases per million per year, when you've given tens of millions of doses to this group, you're going to, by definition, see temporal associations with the vaccine and myocarditis. So the question is it causal? There was a meeting yesterday with the FDA and the CDC. I'd like to think within the next few weeks, we will have data from the Vaccine Safety Data Link or the FDA's so-called PRISM system, and as well as data generated from the UK and Israel to answer this question, because it is myocarditis season now. So we should have plenty of cases of myocarditis that'll be able to answer this question.
Great, good. Well, we'll look forward to hearing that. Dr. Shapiro, can you please discuss the recommended timing of the COVID-19 vaccine in relation to other childhood vaccines? Obviously, 12 to 15-year-olds are definitely still getting other childhood vaccinations. So do we need to worry about timing?
It is a great question. I ran headlong into it the other day in the office when I was seeing an 18-year-old who was ready to go to her prom, and she didn't want to get the COVID vaccine. She had to come. She was in for her regular checkup. She didn't want to get the COVID vaccine because she didn't want to be sick during the time of her prom. So we had to work out this incredibly arcane story about how we were going to immunize this child around her vaccine, around her prom, and then her weeks in the beach and all those things that go into graduation. So the other thing we were saying just before we started to join the community here, we were talking about how the information changes so rapidly. There was a CDC statement just in the last couple of days that clearly addressed co-administration of vaccines. Just to step back, we became very vaccine deficient in the early stages of COVID when we were isolated because nobody was coming to the doctor's office. The AP came out with a very firm statement saying that we want you to see children for well visits, and we comported with that, did everything we could to get children into the office. We continued them really up to the age of 4 with their regular visits to maintain their vaccination rates. But it was difficult. And now that we have seen that drop off, if you will, that has to now be caught up. And more importantly, the data now becomes available. We know that co-administration of COVID vaccine with any other vaccines really has not shown to be in any way detrimental to the response to COVID or the response to our very excellent vaccines that are out there. There doesn't appear to be any safety issues. Co-administration of COVID with COVID vaccine with the other vaccines do not seem to be a safety issue. And none of the children that we've seen have had any difficulty with any unusually increased reactions. Some of the vaccines we do give, we tell folks to expect a little bit of a reaction, but we've not really run into that at all with the adolescents that we've been fortunate to see getting the COVID vaccine.
Great, great. Good to know. So, Dr. Jayraj, can you give us some advice on talking to our kids about getting their shot and any potential fears they may have about this particular vaccine? You know, what if you have a child in your practice who's not sure they want to get this vaccine? What would you say?
Good question, Dr. Akush. Not an easy answer. Again, you know, my pediatricians have a very unusual place in families. We actually become part of the family. we start seeing children, from the time that they are born, and sometimes even prenatal, we see the parents. So we establish a tremendous bond with the parents and with the children. The children know us, right from the time that they are babies and growing up, they see us. There's a tremendous trust, I think, that they have with the doctors, particularly pediatricians. And that's an awful advantage in recommending vaccines. And my own background, I grew up in a developing country, and I have seen probably just about all infectious diseases that can be seen. Other than smallpox, I don't think I saw smallpox. But apart from that, name the infectious disease from rabies to diphtheria to whooping cough to chickenpox to measles, mumps, rubella, meningitis of all kinds, polio. I've seen them all. So for me, sometimes I feel it's a very big advantage when I talk to families, when I talk to children. So for example, people, even young doctors who have not seen, for example, even among some doctors, there's some anti-vaxxers. Probably because, they have not had the advantage for somebody like me. I've seen all the diseases. And to me, I think, the development of vaccines has been one of the triumphs of, the modern world. A lot of the diseases that I used to see, the average doctor, growing up today in the US would not see. So I try to tell a story of that kind, to the young folks, young children who need the vaccine. That sometimes, can make an impression on some of them. And not to say that, in the last year, children have been denied their normal lives. And that is, again, very, very important. Children like to be out. They like to go to school. They like to play games. None of them has been possible in the last 1 year. So that's the kind of thing I think we ought to tell the children. And I think if you tell that, then you leave it to the parents and the child to make that decision, whether they want the vaccine or not.
Great. Dr. Offit, this is a quick one. If you could get your crystal ball out for a second, when do you think children under 12 will be eligible to receive vaccine?
Right. So studies are ongoing, down to as young as 2 months of age. But I think that the first round of vaccines will be sort of from the 4 to 6-year-old to the 12-year-old. Those studies will likely be completed by September, October with a little luck. I think it is possible relatively remotely that these vaccines could then be available by the end of the year, but I think the more likely bet is probably the beginning of next year. But again, you're recording this, so I should probably never make a prediction. But I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, okay. But probably late fall at the earliest, right?
At the earliest.
Yeah, okay. So Dr. Andino, given that, how should families who have children that are under 12 and who aren't eligible to be vaccinated yet, how should they think about the safety for those children if they have older siblings and of course around other adults? Hopefully most of those folks are vaccinated or will be fairly soon, but do you think that those younger children need to stay in masks, for instance, or how would you counsel for those families?
Well, yes, and I think that as Dr. Jarrell said, it's they've been private, they've been taken away from their normal lives. However, they have been the most compliant ones as well. They understand. Even they some of them cannot yet wrap their minds around what's going on. They are quite supportive of the situation, and they do understand that they must, comply with the regulations so that they can actually go and enjoy as much as they can their lives. As a father of a 7-year-old, I can tell you that it has not been an easy task to convince them to keep their mask on properly, but they have, and they've learned to use their mask, over their mouth and nose, which is something that I always encourage. Don't carry it here, not put it here, not under your chin. It should be stretched from ear to ear. It should be removed from the ear down, not pulled from here. Don't drool on it. Don't chew on it. Important. And these are things that they have complied with. So I still think that it is recommended for children that have not yet gotten the vaccine, and for everyone that has not yet been fully vaccinated, meaning that have gotten the vaccines and have been at least 2 weeks after the second dose of vaccination, which is what we consider to be fully vaccinated, and to continue wearing their masks. And I don't know if for next year, for next school year, and probably that question is coming up, regarding the use of mask or the need for vaccination for children, if available at that point, would be something that is going to be mandatory or not. However, I can still say that, and there's been a few studies already that have said that actually school, camp, and daycare, which are usually the most structured, social gatherings, they have less risk of children getting ill or acquire COVID than taking them out to other social gatherings or to the grocery store, for example. So if now that the new guidelines for wearing masks have changed, I think that I still would consider for children that have not yet been vaccinated to continue wearing masks. I do have to make a clarification. Children under 2 years should not be wearing masks, or we're trying not to, or any person that cannot remove their mask with their own hands on their own, because there is always a risk of suffocation. So it's very cute to see some babies with a mask on, but I actually recommend them not to. About the vaccination for moms, during pregnancy, there's another way to, advocate for that as well, to say, well, your newborn might have some antibodies when they're born after mommy getting the vaccination. And it's just a thing of, trying to advise common sense into everyone. We have to understand that even though the vaccination prevents the infection with COVID, it does not really, in some people, can still get the infection and can still be contagious, even though they don't end up in the hospital or critically ill. So they can still somehow be contagious to others. So little ones, still, I think that they should still wear their mask, and parents should avoid taking them to gatherings where people just decide not to wear their masks.
Okay, so given all that, Dr. Shapiro, how important is it going to be that we get as many adolescents vaccinated as possible to help us get to that herd immunity nirvana that we all keep hoping for, so that we can all get rid of our masks one of these days?
Well, first of all, I think this is a great goal for all of us to try to achieve. I don't think there's a magic number. I know our president came out and said by July 4th, he wants 70% of America immunized. I think that's a wonderful message, but there's no magic number here in terms of COVID vaccine that we really can hang our hats on that's going to say this will give you herd immunity. By contrast, let me give you an example of the success and the usefulness of vaccines when it comes to something that everyone in the audience knows about, and that's called measles. By immunizing children regularly and at an infant level at 1 year of age and then just before they enter school, we can keep measles below a number that is just an amazing statement about vaccines. You can all recall that episode a few years back at Disneyland when all of a sudden there were over 1,000 cases of measles in a very short time, and we recognized that there were gaps in our vaccination policies. We tightened it up and measles has gone away again. So using that model, I think children will play a great role in the whole process of immunizing, of keeping COVID at bay as we go forward. But we have a long way to go. And I don't think there's a magic number out there that is yet to be determined that will say everybody will be safe. Do I want us to get to a place where the powers that be say we don't need masking anymore? Well, look where you've come in just a matter of a few months with the evolution of a real robust vaccination program. We can have a pretty normal Memorial Day weekend. We can have a pretty normal summer looking forward. We may still have some issues, as Dr. Andino mentioned, with youngsters who will eventually get approved for vaccination and be able to take their masks off. But for right now, I don't think we can just take all of our guard away. I think we owe it to ourselves. We've come this far. I don't think there's a magic number out there, but I do think that good plans and good policies that we have in place will eventually get us to the place where there will not be any need for masking for all of us.
That will certainly be a welcome day, I think, for all of us. Dr. Offit, there's a couple of questions in the chat from people who've had COVID or their children have had COVID, and they're asking, why would it be necessary that they get vaccinated? And do you think it is necessary that they get vaccinated?
I think we're learning the answer to that question. I think the answer, we will find the answer is they probably don't need to be vaccinated. It looks like natural infection does induce protection. That, and we, for those of us who were following this story right from the beginning, regarding how well a vaccine would do, is when the vaccine first, or the virus first came into this country and started killing people the first week of March of last year, and now you're having hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and millions of people getting infected. The question was, are we starting to see, severe or critical disease in people who've already been infected and are then re-exposed? And the answer was no. So I think we found out then, great. Natural infection appears to protect against disease associated with reinfection, which is not always true. I mean, you can get, strep throat again and again. You can get gonorrhea again and again. And that's why one of the reasons we don't have vaccines against those pathogens. But I think natural infection probably does protect. And now there's 2 recent studies in JAMA showing that for people who were naturally infected that just got 1 dose of mRNA containing vaccine, they had essentially a booster response, acting as if they'd gotten the 2nd dose. So I think the CDC will probably eventually catch up to that. The reason they didn't do this initially, it was mostly programmatic, because if initially they said, we think that natural infection protects, people who've gotten naturally infected don't need to get a vaccine. Now you're telling a population that they need to get antibody testing to see who's been infected and who hasn't, which would have put another bureaucratic level on top of this. And the thinking was, just get vaccinated. Worst case scenario, you'll get a booster response.
Great. Well, and speaking of boosters, do you think we're going to need boosters at some point down the road?
Right, so it depends how you define protection. If you define it the way I think it is reasonable, which is protection against severe critical disease, I think these vaccines will induce relatively long-lived protection. Right now, we know it's roughly 90% effective against disease, meaning mild, moderate, or severe disease for the mRNA vaccines. I think over time, you will see that will decrease to 80%, 70%, 60%, but against severe disease, severe critical disease, the kind that causes you to seek medical attention or go to the hospital or go to the ICU or go to the morgue, I think that's going to be relatively long lasting. As a guess, again, you're recording this, so I should make no predictions, but the recent studies, one in Nature and another one that was in Lancet, have shown that, you seem to induce fairly high frequencies of memory B cells that are in the bone marrow. That predicts longer lived protection, so certainly against severe disease. So I'm thinking years. So it surprised me, for example, when the CEO of Pfizer said that he thinks that it will be a yearly vaccine, which I think would be very unlikely.
Well, that would certainly be welcome news for everyone, I think. Let's hope that is the case. So there's several questions about the fact that Governor Wolf today announced that on June the 18th, at the latest, the mask mandates in Pennsylvania will be lifted because they are predicting that we will reach the Department of Health's goal, which is to have 70% of 18-year-olds and up in the state of Pennsylvania fully vaccinated. So at that point, it is my understanding that the mask mandate will be lifted for everyone, including unvaccinated children. And I just wonder if any of you want to, I'm sorry, I think I said the date wrong, June 28th. Thank you, Kelly. June 28th, the governor said that that would be lifted. And if you want to comment on your sense of the safety, then let's just assume on June 29th, no one has to wear a mask in Pennsylvania. How do you feel about that for unvaccinated younger children?
So I can make a comment, Dr. Akush.
Yeah.
My own, this is just my opinion. It's probably not based on. I personally, I do not feel setting a date is the right thing. I think it depends on how the statistics go from now to that period of time. And I think it's a fluid kind of situation. Obviously, we all like to get rid of the mask. As a matter of fact, many of us have all kinds of programs coming up, and we are hoping that it'll go away. But I think to set a deadline, regardless of how the things are going to be, in my judgment, it's not the right thing. Because then people are going to hold the governor to it. You said June 28th, so you got to do it. So I'm not quite sure. And that's not defensible, I think. That's my view.
It's always good. I agree with you, Dr. Jiraj. I think it's always going to be, at least until the entire population is available to be immunized, to keep masks on and allow kids. Kids have done very well. They've been very adaptable. Kids who, if I had a choice of taking the mask off or keeping the mask on and sending my child to camp, I'd probably leave the mask on and send them to camp. I wouldn't be afraid of saying that to anyone, and you could keep that on the recording. But I think we just have to be intelligent about this. The governor's position is what he needs to do, reading the information that's coming from the CDC, from FDA, and I accept it as a statement of good intention for all Pennsylvanians. But I think we as physicians, we're still going to be wearing masks in our offices, even though a good number of our adolescents are already immunized. We're still wearing masks in hospitals. And I think it just represents a little bit of cautious optimism on all of our parts. So I'd be willing to accept that with no question.
I agree. I will continue to encourage my patients as much as I will encourage my children to do so. It's setting a date, as mentioned, does not mean that, from that day on, COVID is going to disappear. It's as much as people thinking that once they got their second shot of the Pfizer vaccine or their JJ vaccine, the next day they are completely immunized and they will not wear a mask. So we still advise, we've had, I know and I acknowledge and I appreciate that we've had this for long enough, but if you look back in time, it has not been that long either. We definitely can endure a little bit more of discomfort with a mask and fancy ourselves of wearing them as long as it keeps us safe and our community safe. So I do agree. I appreciate and understand, there might be some, political pressures and other types of pressures that are leading into this decision. But we, as doctors, we should, caution. And not only for us who are in primary care and pediatrics, but also thinking about, those other doctors that have been working nonstop in hospitals, taking care of people that have been getting sick. Considering also the fact that as soon as we get vaccinated, and most people get vaccinated in the rest of the world, the less chance of variants that will come in and kind of dodge the immunization that we already have, and maybe target more children than adults could be also a risk. I don't know if I'm making a mistake by saying this again. Maybe Dr. Offit has something to say about this, but I think that we still need to be, just staying on the side of caution.
Here's what I was saying. People need to realize this is at its heart a winter virus. It is. I mean, if you look, when the virus came in and started killing people last March, as we moved to April and May, the number of deaths decreased fairly dramatically. We were at 2,500 deaths, and then it came down to 500, 600 deaths. There were some days where it was 1,000, but then when we hit November, it took off again. So although it can spread during the summer, it really is at its heart a winter virus. And so things are generally going to be better over the summer. My feeling on this is we need to get to about 80% population immunity. And by population immunity, I mean vaccination or natural infection, both of which I think are protective. If you assume from the antibiotic surveillance data that roughly 100 million Americans have already been infected, that's 30% of the population. And now you have roughly 50% of the adult population that's fully vaccinated. That's great. Those are not two separate groups because we obviously vaccinate people who have been naturally infected, but we can get to 80% population immunity. I mean, if you take, as Dr. Shapiro said, the measles, you need to be like in the low to mid 90% range to stop that virus because it's so contagious. I mean, this if we can get to 80%, I really think we can significantly slow. And you're going to know whether or not we did that come next winter. If we get there where we need to get, the next winter will be a bump. If we don't, then there'll be a surge next winter. So we're going to get fooled by the summer, I think. As we move along in the summer, people are going to think, great, this is good, we're past this, and then next winter will come.
Yeah, we had a great summer last summer, and we're seeing our numbers just plummet. Our positivity here in Montgomery County is now under 3%. And I think it's a combination. I think it's mostly due to how many people in this county have been vaccinated, but the weather is certainly helping us out a lot. So, but hopefully we're down and we'll never come back up again. That is my deepest hope. So we are getting close to time already. This has been such a great conversation. I would like to just go around and give each of you, 2 minutes or so to just share any closing thoughts that you have with our audience, or anything maybe that we didn't get to that you thought was important that parents and any kids that are listening might want to hear. So Dr. Andino, I'll start with you.
Let me unmute first before I
Good plan.
make the mistake again.
You got it.
Again, I think I've said pretty much, it's all about not thinking about ourselves, but thinking about others, our community, our loved ones, and the people that do take care of us. We have to be and acknowledge the effort and acknowledge that this is not the scientific part does not have a place in, or should not have a place in this, political, background that's involved in this whole disease and pandemic. But our best interest is to keep our community and our people safe, as well as our children. And the other thing I would like to add is about other vaccines. As Dr. Shapiro said, it's very important that children continue to get their vaccines on time, on their schedule, so that we can actually have a brighter future for them and keep them healthy as much as we can. Thank you again for the opportunity and to get to outreach our lovely community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Jayraj. Yep, don't forget to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for including me in this wonderful discussion. And I must say, I'm proud to be part of Montgomery County. And I do believe, under your leadership, Dr. Kush, I think we have brought the rate down, very low. And one of the efforts that we have done in Montgomery County is we actually, do not wait for the patients to come to us or the people to come to us. We actually go to where the people live. We have held a lot of clinics in churches and places of worship and other public places and mass clinics. And I think, my view is, I think with all these kind of efforts, the vaccination rate in Montgomery County, Dr. Akush, I'm sure will agree with me, is very high, I believe. And again, don't take it lightly. Over 500,000 Americans have died, and so are like 300 to 500 children have died. So it is just, it is quite serious, it can be serious in children. So please, again, do consider the vaccine.
Great, thank you. Dr. Offit, I'm going to do a little bit of a twofer here because I think we do have time for this. And I neglected to ask this, and it is coming up in the chat. Could you just quickly describe how the Pfizer vaccine works, what the mechanism of action is, and then feel free to give some of your closing thoughts.
Sure. So typically, when you make a vaccine, what you want to do is you want to prevent the virus from binding the cells. So the way that you do that is you immunize with the surface protein. It's true for hepatitis B, for a human papillomavirus. So you immunize with the protein. Now you can do that either as just giving the protein itself, which we do say for the hepatitis B vaccine, or you immunize people by giving a whole killed form of the virus, like the inactivated polio vaccine, or you immunize by giving a live attenuated virus. And all of that is a way to give that surface protein so you can make an antibody response to that surface protein so that the virus doesn't attach. This is different. Now you're not giving the protein. What you're doing is you're giving the gene that codes for the protein. So you make the protein. Now the gene is just a small piece of messenger RNA that enters your cell. Now, when it gets there, there's another 200,000 copies of other messenger RNAs that are making proteins and enzymes that are necessary for you to live. So it's an all natural phenomenon. That protein then will get made for a few days, and then that messenger RNA will degrade. It's even if you don't have an immune system, this would not be dangerous to you. You wouldn't have an effective vaccine if you don't have an immune system, but it would not be dangerous. And it's a remarkable immunogen. I really do think this is in many ways the greatest vaccine accomplishment in my lifetime. And my lifetime includes the development of the polio vaccine. So it's remarkable that it was done so quickly and so well. So that's how it works. It works remarkably well. 95 in the preclinical, in the trials, 95% effective for all age groups, for all comorbidities, for all racial and ethnic backgrounds. What do people want? This will be my closing statement. You have this virus, which has brought us to our knees, right? Massive joblessness, massive homelessness, food insecurity, increase in domestic violence, increase in child abuse. Now you have your ticket out with this vaccine, and that there is any pushback to this vaccine is remarkable to me. I couldn't wait to get this vaccine, and people should all pretty much feel the same way.
That's great. All right. Thank you. Dr. Shapiro.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I have to say congratulations to you, Val. As I watch this pandemic evolve in Pennsylvania, the work that Montgomery County did led not only the state, but probably led the nation in its entirety, in its completeness, and in your methodology. So I give you great praise for all that you did. I think, we have lived through an epoch. A pandemic happens once every 100 years, if you think about the flu pandemic in the early 20th century. I don't want to live through another one of these, and I have the opportunity to teach residents in my chairman's conference on a weekly basis. And I say to them, you've lived through this, you will take this with you for the rest of your medical careers in terms of how you interpret immunity, how you respect the science that Dr. Offit just referred to so beautifully and so simply. We haven't really understood the full impact of what we've lived through in the last 16, 17 months. And I think it's going to take us a while to get there. But the fact is that what the world has seen is the brilliance of science and the indeterminate nature of science. We can make a decision today based on what happened in the laboratory, and 2 days later, that science changes. And as Dr. Offit said, it was something purely amazing to see how quickly this messenger RNA vaccine was determined, was figured out, and was produced to the extent that 100 million doses have been given, and we are in a position to see this vaccine coming to its knees, this virus coming to its knees. And I really hope that all of those today that are listening to this and have gone to other sources for information understand that and maybe just remembering that measles story that I just told you. Measles is so infective that if you just drop your guard a little bit, you'll get measles back. I hope we never see COVID again, and I hope Dr. Offit's totally correct in his interpretation that we won't need it. We'll have so much personal immunity. But my hope is that the world of non-scientists understand just how amazing the world of science can be, and the scientists that are doing it, whether they're in the offices taking care of you or at the bench doing the actual hard work. It's truly been remarkable to have lived through this. And I hope everybody, while there's lots of differences that we all have about vaccine, non-vaccine, understand the impact that what we've lived through has on all of us. And I hope they take it to heart. So thank you very much for making me part of this group.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much to all of you. I hope from the bottom of my heart that it's another 100 years before that we have to go through anything like this again. But in case it's sooner than that, we have all really learned a lot from this experience, and we're so fortunate to have all of you here in our community. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to a lot of people tonight. And of course, this is recorded, so folks that couldn't make it tonight can watch it later. And thank you for sharing your expertise and your empathy and your just kindness for what so many families have been going through for this past year. So there's a huge light at the end of the tunnel now. We are really on our way out of that tunnel, and the vaccine is the main reason why. So thanks to all of you, and really appreciate your time this evening. And thanks to everybody who listened and asked questions. We really appreciate your time as well. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.